was like, what the fuck? Because that was silly, but a little bit too silly movie for me. I wanted to shoot both of them. Hi, welcome back. So I recently realized that I have not done a wrap-up for July, and now it's the end of August. I don't know what that's about. I'm usually very regular with those kind of videos, so I'm doing it now. A wrap-up for the past 2 months. Premise: the past 2 months I've done a lot of things. I've gone on vacation, I've filmed a movie in which I was an actress. That was weird, that was crazy. I also started working as a translator. I've done my exams. It was a crazy time. So what I've done to combat the crazy times is reading a lot on my Kindle. It's like I don't have to put a lot of books, like physical books, in my carry-on because I had limited space. So this one was perfect. It has 12 years of experience in its field work. It's still going strong. It's so slow, but I love it. My companion for this 2 months was this little guy. Let's start. I've got a lot of books to talk about, so I'm going to be very speedy. If you want a more in-depth, I think I have some vlogs for some of the books, and some other I'm going to talk about in other videos that are coming up. So July was the busiest month for me, possibly in all of my life, because I started the movie. So I read a lot of manga. I started the month with the first 2 volumes of Choujin X from the same author of Tokyo Ghoul. This series talks about a percentage of humans that can transform into Choujin, which are kind of like superheroes, superhumans, but like monstrous. And the protagonist gets in a situation in which he has to inject an illegal drug into himself and becomes a vulture, like part vulture. And there are people who are out to get him and his friends. It's really intense. Because if you know Tokyo Ghoul, it was very intense, very philosophical. It talks about the ethic of what is a human and what categorize a human as human, which is, I think, a theme in all of his works. Second volume and first volume were kind of like an introduction to the series. Third volume goes so hard, and I don't like to judge manga on their volumes because I think you should judge manga on their story arcs. But the third volume was so fucking intense. I give it 5 stars. It's so good. And then I read the biggest disappointment, I think, for this year. Everybody and their mother had read Divine Rivals and loved it, and told me this is a light fantasy in which there is a war between gods in the background, and it's like a enemies to lovers romance between 2 writers in the forefront, and the writing is beautiful. Babes, this is 4th elementary level writing, like 11-year-old level writing. When I was in high school, I wrote every sentence as long as possible, as flowery as possible. Metaphors did not make sense, and made many syntax error. This book is riddled with everything that I just said. The writing is honestly kind of terrible. It's dense with flowery metaphors that go nowhere near where they should go. Like, they are completely wrong for the structure of the story. Plot holes, the magic system, non-existent. World building, non-existent. The 2 main characters, I wanted to shoot both of them because the main protagonist is kind of very stupid, and the story goes from being like a workplace romance to very bittersweet to like war, maybe, and kind of like a love story. It was very confusing to see the tonal shift of the story when there was like nobody asked you to give this like spectrum of tones. I don't know what to tell you. So writing, a big no. It was also filled with grammatical errors, which, where was an editor? Where was the editors? World building, non-existent. Magic system, laughable. The romance. The story is that these 2 are writing to each other through magical typewriters, but only the main love interest knows that the protagonist is her. She initially thought that she was writing to her brother, and then she realizes that it's another person and falls in love with this other mysterious person. And then when she, after a long while, meets the main love interest, not knowing that the mysterious person and the main love interest are the same person, she falls in love with him for no apparent reason, because she had no development with the main love interest, only with that mysterious person. Love is not commutative. She does not know that they're the same person. Okay, I finished my rant. I gave it 2 stars, but that was very generous. I think 1.5 stars is the true rating, because it was not terrible, but it made me enraged. Then I read a book that I don't think has been translated yet into English, but if you know Christelle Dabo, who wrote A Winter's Promise, I think A Winter's Journey, something like that, she wrote another book that it's very different from her like very luscious fantasy series. It's called Solo Qui in Italian, Ici seulement ici, I think in French, which means here, only here. It talks so very... ci sono le fiamme tricolore! He was complaining, but it was the fiamme tricolore, which I'll insert here. It's an Italian thing that they do with airplanes. Very exciting. I hope they don't come back though. So, it's a supernatural book. It's kind of like magical realism. It talks about a school in which bullying is very rampant. And it's rampant not only because it's middle school, but also because there's this weird fluid that goes inside the walls that makes supernatural things happen. And like, it gets people like very riled up. They get, every emotion get heightened. And there's a group of kids that is investigating this problem, because apparently it's like a cyclical problem. Every like 5 years it happens that somebody, I think somebody gets killed at the end, somebody becomes invisible, people disappear, and it's all a metaphor for very violent bullying. I, as a person who was very violently bullied, I loved it. A lot of people really disliked it because it's a very weird book. The writing is very gritty and the characters are middle schoolers, so they're very annoying at times, but I loved it. It captured the essence of what it's like being in middle school, having your weird face and getting bullied to death by your peers because they don't want to be you. I gave the book, I think, 4.5 stars. It was very good. And then I remembered I was waiting for some sci-fi wantings to kick in. I wanted to read something sci-fi, and I remember somebody on TikTok recommended me these 2 books. These are Little Mushroom. The first volume is Judgment Day, the second volume is Revelations. This is again a Chinese web novel that got translated into English, and it's so good. I devoured those 2 volumes. So we are in the future. The magnetic field of the earth has failed, so radiations hit us like a bus. Only after like a couple of years, a human constructed an artificial like field, and in the meanwhile a lot of people died from cancer, from mutations, and animals mutated along this phenomenon. And so it's really dangerous to go outside the various spaces. Our protagonist though, it's not a human, it's a mushroom that sucked the DNA from a human corpse and became human. Like, he mutated into a sort of a human, and somebody who he believes was a human from the northern base stole his spore, which is kind of like his child because he's a mushroom, so he wants it back. He goes into the nearest northern base and he meets like the chief executioner. This is a young man who has a keen eye for people who have mutated genes, so he spots it and he has the permission to kill these people on the spot. And the story goes on from there. It's intense. It's a very well constructed sci-fi, very well written, and the love story consumed me to my core. It was beautiful. It was everything I wanted. It's a good ass sci-fi series. 5 stars to all the volumes. I loved it. Few words. I reread for the probably 5th times. Changguan Sifu or Have an Official Blessing, Volume 3. Loved it. I love this series. Chinese mythology, a love story spanning 800 years, well-constructed mystery, so good. 5 stars. You know how I told you the story that I go to bed listening to audiobooks, like silly little audiobooks, and I wanted to give Mariana Zapata a try. So I tried first The Wall of Winnipeg and Me, which I think was incredibly mediocre. If I hear one more time somebody call this man in a serious setting The Wall of Winnipeg, like, hey Mr. Wall of Winnipeg, we have to talk, I am going to spontaneously combust, because that was silly, but a little bit too silly and goofy for me. So I give it 3 stars. It was innocuous, it was okay. But then I read Rhythm, Chord, and Malakin. Tell me why this book is not only misogynistic, homophobic, a little bit transphobic, and really filled with slut shaming. It's like incredibly bad. I could not finish it without skimming because it was incredibly frustrating to read, especially the misogynistic and slut shaming aspects. It was just incredibly bad, and it's not a really, if you think a book from 2003, you're like, okay, it was the time, but still, this is a fairly recent book. So I don't know what happened, Mariana Zapata. What happened? 1 star. I was on my rereading kick, so I reread the 2nd and 3rd volume in the Crazy Rich Asians series, which is one of my favorite series of all time. I was hearing the like book slump wheels turning in my brain, so I was like, rereading classics. I love these books. No book slump for me, thank you. So I reread China Rich Girlfriend and Rich People Problems, which I gave China Rich Girlfriend 4.25 stars because I think it's the weakest of the 3, and Rich People Problem 5 stars. It was so good. It's a series about the super duper wealthiest Asians, and their like kind of rich, silly, goofy drama, but it's kind of like also generational trauma in the series. It's very good, it's very funny, it's a comedic, satirical take on the like rich people problems, and I love this series with all my heart. I reread the entirety of Sugar Sugar Rune by Moyoko Anno. It's a manga, it's also an anime that I watched as a child religiously. It's one of my favorite mangas of all time. It talks about little witches that have to like steal the hearts of humans to decree which one of these 2 witches has to be like the new queen of the witches. So you follow Chocolat and Vanilla in their journey. It's so cute, but also gut-wrenching. It's so sad at times. The romance is top-tier romance for me. It's one of my favorite mangas of all time. I love it. Obviously 5 stars. Then I read a book that I was not expecting to read. I had finished all my favorite like books that I had on my Kobo, and I was like, I have no new books to read. Let's see if I have like some remnants of old books that I had put in this. And I had apparently bought I'm Not Myself These Days by Josh Kilmer Purcell. It's a 2006 book about a drag queen who falls in love with a cocaine addicted escort. And I was like, what the fuck? And then I discovered it's a memoir. I'm Not Myself These Days. It's a real story. And I loved it. I unexpectedly loved it. It was incredibly funny. So well written. There are some phrases in this book that I still remember to this day. And I read it almost a month ago. It was so good. Also incredibly sad. It uses a lot of problematic terms in our times, but it paints a picture of what it was like to be in the queer underbelly of New York in like the late 90s, early 2000s. And it's such a good picture because Joshua Porcel was a drag queen named Aqua who used live fishes into his corset. Insanity. And he falls in love with a young boy who he believes is just an escort, but he does like niche kinks for his clients, and they live in this penthouse. This boy who is called, I think, Jack, or he calls Jack for anonymity, begins to get addicted to cocaine, and it's incredibly tragic to see. But in the meantime, it's so funny. Like, Aqua goes to Japan at one point. It's very offensive to hear how they talked, but it was how they talked. It's a picture, it's like a historical document, and I loved it for that reason. So interesting, incredibly well written. You should read it too, with obviously critical lenses, but it like unexpectedly amazing. And then, boys and girls, I did not know what to read, so I gave the chances to a random damnei, so another Chinese web novel. I don't even know how to speak about it. I read Haske and his White Cat Shizen. I read volume 1 and 2, but actually I read a lot more because these are the only 2 volumes that have been printed into English, and I could not stand it. I went and found some fan translations, and I'm still reading it. This is a series that is almost 3,000 pages long, but I don't care. I don't care. First volume was kind of a little bit slow, but then the second volume hit and I was hooked. It's my current obsession. I cannot stop reading it. It has been, I don't know how many days, like 10 days. I've been reading it for 10 days. I don't know what to tell you. It stole my heart. We are in the world of Chinese cultivation. So we start the story with our protagonist Moran, who has become the tyrant of the cultivation world. He has killed so many people, destroyed so many cities, and has become the tyrant. And he has nobody in his old life when he was young that is still alive, so he's like, well, time to die, ingests some poison and dies. And he wakes up in the cycle of reincarnation, not in the way that he thought it was possible. He wakes up in an alternate reality in which he is still 16. So he wakes up in the past. He gets a second chance to life in which his greatest love of his life, Shimei, is still alive. His enemy, like enemy number 1, who is his Shizen, so his master, Chuanin, is still alive, and everybody's still alive, and he's still 16 with a pure mind. He gets a second chance. He changes in the meanwhile, obviously. I'm now at a point where he is, I think, 22. And he realizes that maybe the love of his life, it's not the person that he thought it would be, and there's actually somebody else who has reincarnated from his previous life that is attempting to his life and the lives of his friends. So good, like the enemies to lovers, the vindictive turn to good hero story, the redemption arc. It's incredibly graphic in its description of violent gore, sex. It's an adult series, but tell me why I cannot stop reading it. I cannot read anything else. This was the last book that I read, the last volumes that I read, and I don't know, so good. I had actually a really good reading month, like plural. A lot of really good books, a lot of 5 stars. One of the worst books that I've read this year, but that's understandable. You have to read bad books to read good books. And I'm very happy with it. I hope you loved this video. If you could like and comment, it would mean the world to me. And if you want to like connect with me, I have some socials there down below, and I'll see you in the next one. It will be a reading blog in which we'll be on the search for another 5 stars, if you catch my drift. I hope you like it, and I'll see you next time. Goodbye!